Hi, folks. Let's talk it over. I'm Ken Weene. With me today, my wonderful co-host, Monica Brinkman. And I saw something in the news lately that kind of got me thinking a bit. Okay. As you know, the Swedish government has been trying to join NATO.
Yes.
And
Yeah, it's been in the news. Yeah.
And there's been some kickback or resistance, particularly from the country of Turkey. And
Yeah.
one of the issues, I mean, there are a couple issues that have been involved. One is that the Turkish government has, if not welcoming, accepting of members of certain Kurdish, particularly groups, that Turkey considers terrorists. But the other, which is the one I want to talk about today, has been the question of burning Korans. Now, for those of you, if there are anybody left in the world who doesn't know that the Quran is the holy book of the Islamic faith,
Mhm.
it is believed by Muslims over the world that the book was dictated, in effect, to the Prophet Muhammad by Allah, God. And the other thing is that it was not an easy process. There was one attempt and it didn't work, and it was redone. And, it's a really, in and of itself, a fascinating story because it's very reminiscent of, in this country, the Book of Mormon, which, of course, Joseph Smith claimed that he
Yes.
saw, he read, and it was shown, and then he had to redo it. So and of course, it's also very similar to what we think about the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, which Jews believe it was dictated by God. And then, of course, the New Testament, although nobody believes that it was dictated specifically, but it's inspired by God.
Mhm.
So, these are holy books. And there's another one I'm going to talk about in a minute. Actually, I'm sure there's more than one other, but there's one other I'm going to talk about in a minute.
Yeah. There's many, many.
And so in Sweden, there has been tolerance as part of freedom of expression of burning Qurans. And the thing that I saw today was now they're going to allow, not that they ever hadn't allowed, but it's been raised, can we burn a Torah? Now, Torah, there's a difference between a Bible and a Torah. If it is just a printed Bible, even if it's just the first 5 books of the Old Testament, it's not a big deal. I mean, there are people who are going to be unhappy, let's be honest, but
Yeah.
the Torah is one that has been properly copied onto the proper material by a proper scribe in a proper manner, and it is considered a symbol of God. So the question is, basically, is it all right to burn not just books, but the sacred books or the sacred objects of others? Now, it doesn't just stop at books, of course. If you remember when the Taliban, way back, first took control in Afghanistan, they destroyed huge statues of the Buddha.
Yeah.
As being graven idols. And now, by the way, I understand they're selling tickets to people to come and visit the site to see what remains of the destroyed Buddhas as a way to get cash. So is it all right to destroy what's sacred to others? Now, that's
Why is it needed?
well, but is it all
I mean,
right?
it's not a violent act, which is one good thing, but
Oh,
it,
wait, whoa.
it's something that's very dear to people.
Oh my, I think it's one of the most violent acts.
Well, I mean, it's not injuring someone. It's not.
I don't agree with you, Monica. I
I
think
mean, mentally,
it injures the believer. It
yeah,
injures the
mentally
believer.
it might.
And this goes back, I mean, at one time, nobody probably would have even thought of doing this kind of thing.
I don't think it should be done. It's ridiculous.
And then they started burning flags.
Yeah.
I hate flags, as you know, Monica. I don't support any flag. I think flags existed to create conflict and to help facilitate war. And therefore, I don't fly a flag of any kind, not even for the causes I believe in. But, do we burn what is sacred to another? Now, the book I wanted to talk about here for a moment is the Sikh book, which I believe I'm not sure. I think it translates to the Book of Martyrs, but I'm not sure. I may be wrong about that.
Mhm.
And the Sikhs have their own, it's a separate religion. It's kind of someplace between the Hindu faith and Islam. It was kind of evolved in northern India during the Muslim, as I understand, Muslim occupations. And but it's a very beautiful faith. One of the tenets of the faith is you have to feed everyone. Mm-hmm. So if you go to a Gurdwara, and I have been to one, if you go to a Gurdwara, they give you food, and they are very offended if you refuse it. What my friend and I did when we went, since we did not need their food, was we found a couple street beggars and gave the food to them.
Yeah.
Passing on that blessing or that obligation. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful faith with a lot of dignity and not a long history, but a lot of history. So is it all right to burn that book? And the reason I picked that is because, most of us really don't have reason to. But is it all right to burn things that are sacred to others? Where does my freedom of expression end? Because you have freedom from attack. How do we balance? And what is the difference between now? Let's say that you want to burn this, Memoirs from the Asylum, one of my books. Okay? Is that it's sacred to me in a sense? It's my baby.
I know, don't burn it. Oh.
But what do we mean by sacred? Obviously, I'm not suggesting that book is sacred. But what is sacred, and where do those restrictions lie? Where should freedom of expression and freedom of religion and freedom from harassment and fear, where is the line? Now, I'm not proposing that I know the answer to that. I wish I did.
Yeah, I think a lot of people wish we did.
But I guess what I'm suggesting is that we constantly be asking ourselves if something is sacred to somebody else. Does that change? And it is not sacred to us. Does that not change our obligation to the object anyway? Because we must respect the awe, which is the underlying sensation of faith, the awe-inspiring, the awe of God, if we believe in a God, or of nature, that inspiring this other person. Do we have the right to ignore what speaks to their sense of faith. Now, I don't know if you can see these, Monica. I'm going to just tilt this up a little.
Yes.
If you look over my head, there are 3 of my collection of 5 masks done by a Navajo artist by the name of David John. I bought these in a gallery that represents David, but I have met him and his wife. He's been to the house to visit his children. Now, the thing is, these masks, he is, as far as I know, still, at the time I know he was, the only Navajo artist who was permitted to use the Navajo sacred symbols and forms on his productions, these masks. So they represent part of the Navajo sacred. Okay. Now, I don't have a lot of stuff, and these masks, do they give me? I have a responsibility to them. I mean, I'm at that point where I'm, okay, what am I going to do with stuff when I die? What am I asking David to do with stuff?
Yeah.
Just take these to a museum and give them to him.
Mm-hmm.
Because they cannot be, in my mind, mistreated, because they are of Navajo sacred. Okay. And to me, that delimits, okay, as long as it's somebody sacred, and as long as that sacred does not involve hurting others, that final obvious end product, then I have to respect the sacred. Your sacred should be sacred to me because I respect your being as sacred. Now, this is all based on me, on a kind of theistic Spinozan view. I don't believe in this specific creator God or involved God, but I do believe that there is a connectedness to the universe, and that we find it in our souls, if you will, the soul of man, not as something that God inserted in me at some point at conception or at birth or at the age of 3 as some Native Americans. I believe that my soul is my connection, my connectedness. Mm-hmm. That rests on the sacred. And so therefore, again, I have an obligation to your sacredness.
Ken, but it's so easy, and all that it's going to do is make things worse for people who do those type of things, burn these sacred flags, books.
Doesn't that depend where you are? If I were at a Trump rally, Make America Great Again rally, and I took out a Quran and I burned it, I would imagine that I'd get great cheers. It would make my life easier. Okay, there's always going to be, Monica, and this is ultimately the test of our dignity as humans, or integrity as humans. There are always going to be times and places where it is going to be easier to reject the other person's sacred. Sometimes it's easier, and we don't even know it's easier, because we don't think about their sacredness. I'll give you an example. Barry Goldwater, who was a senator from the state of Arizona and who ran for president of the United States, and whom I had the great honor of meeting, by the way, and who was an incredibly charismatic man and a nice man in many ways, and a very decent man in many ways. One of his things was that he had great respect for the Native Americans of Arizona. Mm-hmm. And he collected Kachina dolls, which, if you don't know what they are, you should look them up, or you should come here to Phoenix and go to the Heard Museum and look at the collection that Barry Goldwater collected, because he gave all of those. I believe he had both Hopi and I believe he had Navajo and Hopi, and there may be another tribe or two, but those are the two biggies. Kachina dolls. He collected them, and he gave them to the Heard Museum. So they have this marvelous collection. And one of the things that bothers me, and we used to have a friend who worked there, Deb was our friend as well, Martha, and I would always talk to her about this, that despite the fact that he wanted to honor these Kachinas, these religious dolls, even though Barry Goldwater wanted to respect them, he did wrong by them. Because one of the obligations is, if you have a Kachina, is that you're supposed to feed it. It eats corn. And so you're supposed to have a small basket, a bowl of corn. And if you have it in the display case, you're supposed to have the corn for it to eat. And of course, the Heard Museum has never done that. And Barry Goldwater never did that. Now,
did he even know this, though?
I can't fault him for not knowing, because so many things we don't know.
Yeah.
But we have that obligation. Okay, we have that obligation to the sacred. Now in the world, we have a movement going on in which sacred objects, remains of people, but also other objects, are being returned to tribes and communities, especially in Africa, in parts of Asia, where they, things are being returned that at one time the British Museum, which I have been to, and it's really awe-inspiring. They have all this booty they collected. And now museums are returning these things.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really marks this is that they are trying to return them in a way that honors the traditions. So they're not just simply pushing things into crates, packing them in styrofoam and shipping them out. They're doing ceremonies, they're doing properly. So I guess what I'm saying is that on the one hand, we have this intolerance, the intolerance of those people who often define themselves by their faith, by the way. Most of those Trump supporters would tell you that they're really devout Christians, and yet they do not respect the religion or the awe or the connected soulness of the Quran and the Muslim who believes in the Quran. Now, I was watching something. This is one last thought on this. I know I've gone on a lot here, Monica, and you've been very patient with me. Thank you. The one more thing I want to say. I was watching the other day, and I think it's part of why I got this, a film about Malcolm X. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you remember Malcolm.
I remember Malcolm X, yeah.
Malcolm X was killed.
Black Panthers too.
Black Muslim. And then he broke away from Elijah Muhammad because he was really more intent on challenging the white. Mm-hmm. And then Malcolm X went on a Hajj. As a Black Muslim, he went on a Hajj. A Hajj is a pilgrimage to Mecca. Mm-hmm. And on his Hajj, Malcolm X's life was changed. And the thing that changed it was evidently there was some question as to whether what we we're calling black Muslims, were Muslims in the eyes of the Sharia court in Mecca. Mm-hmm. And you go on a Hajj, you don't get into Mecca if you're not a Muslim. I mean, you don't get there, period. Okay, so he was stopped, and they had to process him in the Sharia court. And during this time, he evidently stayed with a host, somebody in the community who offered to put him up as his guarantor in his home. And then subsequently, he went on the Hajj with this person, the actual into the town pilgrimage. And this person was a white person. His skin was white, his eyes were blue, as many Arabs are, you know. And that realizing that it was not God who decreed racism. In fact, the God that Muslims worship, whom they call Allah, is a God that accepts all humans, that it is only faith and submission to God's will that is required of you to be Muslim. Mm-hmm. Now, the faith in the teachings of Muhammad, obviously. Now, you know, we know there are different branches of Islam. There's like the Sunni and Shia, and you know, historical differences and groups like the Kurds are sort of, you know, but a little different. But what we know is that, you know, if you were accepted as a Muslim, you can go in the Hajj. So Malcolm X was accepted. He did go, and he went with this man whom, up until that moment, it would never have occurred to him to consider as a brother. Yeah. Now, Malcolm X is one of my great heroes. I'm going to tell you that. Okay, I'm not a black person. I actually lived a couple of blocks from where he was assassinated. You know, the summer he was assassinated, I had moved out of where I had moved someplace else, but I had been living in Upper Harlem. And I consider out Malcolm X one of the great men of my life because he knew what he stood for. He followed it through. He was a man of total faith in faithfulness as a man, faithfulness as a man of integrity. And what I loved most about him was at the end, he came to realize that we are connected. What connects us is exactly what we've been talking about, our respect for the soul. If you want to talk about the soul, let's talk about that part of the other that we can respect, that part of the other that connects us one to another person, the I-thou of relationship.
Yeah. No, I've been quiet because I find it interesting, and especially living through the times of Malcolm X, and the way they presented him to us was terrible. But truth eventually comes out, Ken. Yeah, I think people should respect sacred things to other people also. And there's just no need for this hysteria. I mean, protest. Why can't you just protest without doing all this?
Well, and now I'm just going to throw the monkey wrench here and point out that we have just scratched the topic, because we can also go into what about what you write? What about publishing a cartoon? What about, you know, so where does the other end of it end? I know that there are issues like that, and maybe we should do another discussion of where do I have the right to intrude on your sacred?
Yeah, that's a very confusing issue right now to some people. So that would be something that we definitely need to talk about. Well, Ken, it was quite interesting listening to this, and I think it's something that many people don't even think about.
Mhm.
But that it would be like if someone, like you said, we have many Christians in America. If someone would take the Bible and tear it up or burn it, like you're saying, it would hurt them. So think about the other person also. Alrighty. Well, I think we have a little something we want to show the folks. So I hope you enjoyed this little conversation, and come back again soon. Subscribe and you won't miss a podcast. Here you go.
Memoirs from the Asylum by Kenneth Weene. A novel of emotion, madness, life, and the search for freedom. The nurse with the black hair and the bloodshot eyes had propped Marilyn up that morning. She'd coaxed a few spoons of oatmeal or cream of wheat or whatever down her throat. Marilyn likes to watch the black-haired nurse with the bloodshot eyes feed her. She's so dexterous with the napkin. The drools and dribbles are wiped away before they can stain her bedclothes. It isn't easy being a schizophrenic. It takes effort to stay hidden. If she makes a mistake, even a little one, she will be found out. See how careful the mouse is to stay still? He hopes the cat won't see him hiding there, but if she sees him, he'll jump back inside the hole where she can't follow him. But the cat did catch the mouse. She had seen her eating him, throwing him up and down in the air like a little ball until, tired with her game, she snapped his body apart. The mouse should never have come out of his hole, Marilyn thinks. He should have stayed in there, except when it was rainy or snowy or cloudy or night, or not sunny anyway. That is the best thing of all. It always is. She wonders if she could make a sign warning cats to stay away. Can cats read? That is a question worth pondering. Some of us land in the morgue, some of us land in the asylum, and some of us build our own asylums. It's all the same. It is, in the end, all the same. Memoirs from the Asylum is available in print and Kindle from Amazon.com.